The trials began 6 months after the war ended. Observer Thak and 16 other Vrin officials sat in a courtroom built specifically for these proceedings. Location was neutral ground on the human colony world of New Geneva. Representatives from 47 different species attended. As observers, humanity wanted the galaxy to witness what happened when you forgot that life had value. The lead prosecutor was Ambassador Chen Lish, stood before the tribunal and the assembled witnesses with quiet determination. We are here to establish accountability. She began not for the malfunction of a security drone, but for the callous dismissal of a father's sacrifice for the systemic dehumanization that allowed Vrin officials to call my nephew livestock for the cultural arrogance that led the collective to believe they could murder a human and offer credits as compensation. The trials were broadcast across the galaxy. Every species watched as humanity meticulously documented Vrin crimes. The offense was overwhelming. Security footage showed the drone malfunction, but also revealed it had been overdue for maintenance internal. Vrin communications proved officials knew about the defects, but delayed repairs to save costs. Observer. Their Exxon reports demonstrated a pattern of dismissing human safety concerns, but the most damning evidence was cultural anthropologists testified about Vrin society. They explained how the collective had optimized everything for efficiency, how they'd removed emotion from decision-making, how they genuinely could not comprehend why a parent would sacrifice themselves for a child. They are not evil. One expert testified they are simply incapable of understanding love, and that incapability led them to commit an unforgivable act. The defense argued that Vrin officials had followed their own laws, that cultural differences should be considered, that humanity's response was disproportionate to the original offense. Ambassador Chen Li listened to these arguments with controlled fury. When her turn came to respond, she stood before the court and spoke directly to the Vrin defendants. You say your response was lawful under collective rules. She stated, you say we should respect cultural differences, but there are some principles that transcend culture. The value of life is one of them. The love between parent and child is another. My nephew James Chen died protecting his daughter Maya. In that moment, he demonstrated something fundamental about humanity. We care more than we calculate. We love more than we optimize. We will sacrifice everything for those we protect. You called that inefficient. We call it being human, and we will never apologize for it. The tribunal deliberated for 3 weeks. When the verdict came, it was unanimous. All 17 Vrin officials were found guilty of negligent homicide and crimes against sapient dignity. The sentence was unprecedented. They would serve 20 years in human custody, but not in a prison. They would work in human orphanages across colony worlds. They would care for children who had lost parents. They would learn through direct experience what they had destroyed. Observer Thek stood when the sentence was read. Its translator device struggled to convey emotion, but something in its posture suggested shock. This is cruel. It protested, forcing us to engage with human offspring, making us perform parental functions. We do not comprehend. The judge was a human woman named Sarah Martinez. She had lost her husband, Captain Martinez, when he rammed the paternal instinct into a Vrin cruiser. Cruelty would be executing you. She said flatly, cruelty would be putting you in isolation for 20 years. Instead, we are giving you the opportunity to understand what you took from Maya Chen. You will care for human children. You will see them grow and learn and thrive, and maybe by the end of your sentence you will comprehend why a father would die to protect his daughter. If you cannot learn that, then you are beyond redemption. The Vrin were taken into custody across human space orphanages, prepared to receive them. Social workers warned the institutions about the challenges ahead, but they also expressed hope. Maybe the Vrin could learn. Maybe forced empathy could create genuine understanding. Time would tell. Meanwhile, the Vrin collective itself faced consequences. Peace treaty was brutal by any standard. Vrin territory was broken into independent systems. Each world would govern itself. They were forbidden from reuniting into a collective government for 200 years. Vrin military forces were dismantled. Every remaining ship was marked with a human sigil. The image showed a parent shielding a child. It would remain on every Vrin vessel for 5 generations. Permanent reminder. Vrin worlds had to establish cultural exchange programs with humanity. Their children would learn human history they would study human philosophy. They would understand what they had fought against the Vryn, accepted these terms because they had no choice there. Civilization had been broken, their military was destroyed, their breeding population would not recover for decades. They had learned the hardest lesson ever: underestimate the species that values love over efficiency on. Kepler 44, to be Sarah Chen, stood at a memorial that had been built where James died. The structure was simple. Statue showing a father throwing himself in front of danger to protect his child. Maya stood beside her mother. She was 8 years old now. Old enough to understand what her father had done, old enough to miss him every single day. Hundreds of people gathered for the memorial dedication. Admiral Catherine Okonkwo attended. She wore her dress uniform and carried the weight of 11,000 deaths on her shoulders. Ambassador Chen Li came from Earth. Veterans of the war stood in silent ranks, and representatives from species across the galaxy watched Catherine approach the podium. To speaks, she looked at Maya Chen and saw the reason for everything. "We are not the strongest species," she began. "We are not the fastest or the smartest or the oldest. Other species have superior technology. Other species live longer and think faster and build bigger, but no species in this galaxy cares more than we do. No species values life the way humanity does. No species loves as fiercely as humans love." James Chen proved that when he threw himself in front of a plasma burst to save his daughter, and humanity proved it when we fought a war to ensure his sacrifice was honored. Vryn called him livestock. They offered compensation and expected us to move on. They did not understand that we never forget, we never forgive, and we never abandon our own. Today we dedicate this memorial not just to James Chen, but to every human who died protecting something precious, and we send a message to the galaxy. You may have superior weapons, you may have advanced technology, you may believe you are stronger than us, but you will never care more than we do, and that makes us the most dangerous species you will ever encounter, because we will burn entire civilizations to ash rather than let you dismiss a parent's love. The assembled crowd stood in silence. Maya Chen walked forward and placed flowers at her father's statue. She touched the metal hand that was frozen forever in the act of pushing her to safety. "I miss you, Daddy," she whispered. Sarah Chen joined her daughter, and they stood together, mother and daughter, survivor Admiral. Catherine watched them and felt tears stream down her face. The galaxy species that had witnessed the war understood. Humanity had proven its point. You do not harm human children. You do not dismiss human sacrifice, because humanity remembers and humanity responds with judgment and with fire. The memorial service ended, the crowds dispersed, but the message remained in every Vryn ship marked with the parent-child sigil in every orphanage where Vryn officials learned to care for human children. Every history class where young beings learned about James Chen. The galaxy would remember a New Geneva observer. It began its first day working in an orphanage. Human social workers showed it how to care for a 6-year-old girl whose parents had died in a mining accident. Held the child awkwardly, she cried and wanted her mother. Deck did not understand why, but it was required to comfort her anyway. Over the following months, something changed in observer. Thick, slowly and painfully, it began to comprehend it. Watched children laugh and play it, saw them grieve and heal it, learned their names and their stories. And one day a child fell and scraped her knee. Thick's first instinct was to calculate the injury severity and determine its optimal treatment protocols, but then it saw the child's tears. It saw her fear and pain, and without thinking, Thick picked her up and held her. The child wrapped small arms around its chitinous body and sobbed. That felt something it had never experienced before. Understanding this was what it had taken from Maya Cho, not just a father, but comfort and safety and unconditional love, that filed its first report. Expressing remorse, it would take years for the other Vryn officials to reach similar understanding. Some never would, but enough learned enough. Change. Then the galaxy took note. Humanity had not just won a war, they had proven that their values were worth fighting for. That love mattered more than efficiency, that every life had dignity, that parents who sacrificed for their children were heroes, not livestock, not statistics. Heroes. Sarah Chen eventually remarried Dae-kind man who loved Maya as his own daughter. They never forgot James's picture hung in their home. His story was told to Maya's younger siblings. His sacrifice became part of their family history, and every year on the anniversary of his death they returned to the memorial. They were never alone veterans. Came officials, came people from across human space, made pilgrimages, because James Dunn had become something larger than himself. He was a symbol of parental love, human determination. The war spread across Vrin's space like wildfire. What the collective expected to be a brief, punitive action became an existential nightmare. Human fleets struck at military installations with surgical precision. They avoided civilian targets but showed no mercy to Vrin. Military forces on the industrial world of Vrin 7 humanity unveiled weapons that had existed only in theoretical research. Kinetic bombardment platforms dropped tungsten rods from orbit. Each rod was just metal but accelerated to tremendous velocity by gravity and electromagnetic rails. They struck Vrin military factories with the force of nuclear weapons but left no radiation. The Vrin watched their production capacity vanish in columns of fire. Admiral Conquo broadcast a message after each strike. This is for James Chen. She said simply, the Vrin tried to adapt their tactics but discovered a terrible truth. Humans learned faster than the collective could adjust. Every Vrin strategy was countered within days. Every rep was sprung deliberately, with human forces sacrificing themselves to map enemy tactics and Vrin 12. A small human strike team allowed themselves to be captured. The Vrin interrogated them and believed they had gained intelligence about human fleet movements. They positioned their defensive forces accordingly. The human fleet arrived from a completely different vector. The captured team had fed their interrogators false information. All 5 team members died in Vrin custody, but their sacrifice allowed humanity to take the system with minimal casualties. Commander Sarah Kimura watched the battle unfold from her laboratory ship. She had developed fusion warheads that burned hotter than stars now. Those weapons tore through Vrin shield technology like it was paper. She felt sick every time she saw the results of her work, but she kept improving the designs because somewhere on Kepler 4, for to be a little girl named Maya was growing up without her father, and that could never be made right. But it could be answered. The Vrin High Command attempted diplomatic outreach. They contacted Earth's Unified Council with offers of negotiation. We are prepared to discuss terms. Their message stated clearly there has been a cultural misunderstanding. We wish to establish new protocols for human-variant interaction. Please halt military operations while we negotiate. Earth's response was delivered by Ambassador Chen Li. James Kuhn's aunt spoke with quiet fury. You murdered my nephew. She said you called him livestock. You dismissed a father's sacrifice as inefficient. Now you want to negotiate because you're losing. No, the time for diplomacy ended when Observer. They offered us 10,000 credits for my nephew's life surrender. Those responsible for James Chun's death submit to war crimes tribunals. Accept occupation and disarmament. Those are our terms. There will be no negotiation. Vrin rejected the demands. They still believed their superior numbers would prevail. They still did not understand what they were fighting on Vrinduin. Humanity deployed biological weapons for the first time. Dr. James Okafor had spent 3 months developing a targeted virus. It was designed with horrifying precision. The virus would not kill Vrininsta. It would sterilize their breeding population for exactly 1 generation. Vrininta, who contracted it, would survive. Their children would survive. Their grandchildren would never exist. It was a weapon of grief. Way to make the Vrin feel the same loss that Maya Chen would carry for the rest of her life. The virus spread through Vrin breeding worlds before the collective understood what was happening. By the time they implemented quarantines, it was too late. An entire generation of Vrin would grow up knowing they were the last. Dr. Okafor submitted his resignation after deploying the weapon. I did what needed to be done, he wrote in his final report, but I cannot continue. I have become the thing I swore to fight against, someone who uses science to cause suffering. Admiral Okonkwo accepted his resignation, but sent a personal message in return. What you did was terrible, she wrote, but necessary. The Vrin needed to understand loss. They needed to feel what we feel. History will judge whether we were right, but Maya Chen will grow up in a galaxy that knows her father's sacrifice mattered. The war continued human. Cyber warfare specialists crashed through. Vryn networks with devastating efficiency systems that had run the collective for centuries failed in Cascade's power. Grids collapsed, communication networks went dark, financial systems froze. The Vryn discovered that humans had been studying their technology since first contact. Every trade agreement had included hidden intelligence gathering. Every cultural exchange had mapped Vryn computer architecture. Now that knowledge was weaponized. Lieutenant Maria Santos led a team of 20 hackers from a ship deep in human space. They never came close to Vryn territory, but their code reached into the heart of the collective and tore it apart. She worked 18-hour days writing programs that destroyed infrastructure. At night, she looked at pictures of her own daughter and wondered what kind of galaxy she was creating. But in the morning, she wrote more code because someone had to make sure the Vryn understood. You do not dismiss a parent's love you. Do not call sacrifice inefficient. The Vryn military began to fracture. Some commanders sued for peace independently. Others fought with desperate determination. A few understood what the humans were teaching and felt something like shame, but the collective high command remained defiant, retreated to their core systems and prepared for a final stand. Admiral Okonkwo gathered her fleet for the assault on Vryn. Prime, the human armada, had grown to over 300 ships behind them. The entire industrial capacity of human civilization produced more than. Vryn assembled their remaining forces, 200 vessels, the last of their military might. Both fleets faced each other across the void. Catherine broadcast one final offer: surrender, observer Thek, and all officials involved in James Chun's death. She demanded submit to human occupation. Accept our terms, or we will take everything from you. The Vryn High Command responded with weapons fire. The final battle for Vryn Prime began. It was the largest engagement of the warships on both sides. Fought with everything they had, the Vryn used tactics born of centuries of military experience. The humans used fury born of parental love-in. The end fury when the Vryn fleet was shattered. Human marines landed on Vryn Prime and fought street by street. Through the capital, resistance was fierce, but ultimately futile. The collective government fell, and 3 days observer Thek and 16 other Vryn officials were captured and placed in human custody. The war was over. Humanity had won, but the cost was staggering. Earth had lost 42 ships and 11,000 crew members. Dozens of Vryn worlds lay in ruins. An entire generation of Vryn would never be born. Admiral Catherine Okonkwo stood in the Vryn High Command Center and looked at casualty reports: 11,000 humans dead, hundreds of thousands of Vryn military casualties, millions of Vryn civilians affected by the biological weapon, all because one father died protecting his daughter, all because the Vryn could not understand that sacrifice mattered. She thought about James Chen throwing himself in front of that plasma burst. She thought about Maya growing up without a man. She knew with absolute certainty that humanity had done the right thing, not the easy thing, not the clean thing, but the right thing. The galaxy needed to learn. You do not harm human children. You do not dismiss human parents. You do not call our love inefficient, because humanity will burn your entire civilization to ash rather than let that stand. Catherine opened a channel to Earth Command. Vryn Prime is secured. She reported the collective has surrendered. Requesting instructions for occupation and tribunal procedures, the response came from the Unified Council. Well done, Admiral. Bring them home. It's time for justice. Catherine looked at her crew, who stood exhausted but unbowed. They had done terrible things. They had unleashed weapons that would haunt human conscience for generations, but they had also proven something important. Humanity would never forget. Humanity would never forgive. Most importantly, humanity would never abandon its own Chai. Thought one more time about James Chene, man she had never met, a father who made the choice every parent hopes they would make. His sacrifice had changed the galaxy, and now everyone would remember his name. Everyone would remember what happened when you forgot that human love was the most powerful force in the universe. The Vryn would spend generations learning that. Lesson on the rest of the galaxy had been watching. They had seen what humanity could do when provoked. They had seen the terrible swift sword of human justice. Catherine hoped they would remember, because she never wanted to fight another war like this. But if someone harmed a human child again, someone dismissed a parent's sacrifice, humanity would respond with judgment tanned with fire. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Rin space in perfect military formation. Admiral Catherine Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Righteous Fury and watched her tactical display light up with ship signatures. Vrin had detected them and were scrambling their defensive force. Said wanted them to see what was coming. Open a channel. Catherine ordered all frequencies, including civilian. I want every Vrin in this system to hear what I have to say. The communications officer nodded and activated the transmission. This is Admiral Catherine Okonkwo of the Human Unified Fleet. She began. Her voice was calm and cold. We have come for judgment. You killed James Chen and dismissed his sacrifice as statistically inefficient. You called a father's love livestock loss. You have been given the opportunity to make amends. You have refused, therefore. We are not here to negotiate. We are here to teach you what happens when you forget that every life has value. Surrender those responsible for James Chun's death. You have 1 hour, the Vrin High Command responded within minutes. Their transmission showed Observer Deck itself, flanked by military commanders. Your presence in collective space is illegal. Deck stated you will withdraw immediately or face defensive action. We do not recognize your authority to demand anything from the collective. The human James Chen was compensated according to our laws. This matter is closed. Catherine cut the transmission without responding. She had given them a chance. They had chosen poorly. All ships, she announced across the fleet channel, weapons free. Show them what humans do to those who harm our children. The Vrin defensive fleet moved to intercept with confidence. Born of superior technology, their ships were faster and more maneuverable than human vessels. Their weapons had longer range and their shields could withstand tremendous punishment. They had every tactical advantage, but they had never fought an enemy that refused to acknowledge tactical disadvantages mattered. The first engagement began when Vrin cruisers opened fire at maximum range, their plasma weapons carved through space with lethal accuracy. Human ships took the hits on their forward shields and kept coming. The Vrin commanders watched in confusion as human vessels absorbed damage that should have forced them to break off. Instead, the humans accelerated. Captain James Martinez commanded the destroyer. Paternal instinct, and he watched his shield strength drop to 40%, then 30, then 20. His tactical officer shouted warnings, but Martinez ignored them. All power to engines. He ordered, I want ramming speed, sir. His executive officer protested, we can fall back, and my daughter is 7 years old. Martinez interrupted, same age as Maya Chen. These things think a father's life doesn't matter. Let's show them. Different, the paternal instinct surged forward through a hail of Vrin. Fire its shields collapsed and plasma bursts tore into the hull. Atmosphere vented from 3 decks. Engineering section reported critical damage. Martinez kept accelerating. All hands abandoned ship. He announced, this is the captain's fight now. Most of the crew made it to escape pods. Martinez stayed at the helm and aimed his dying ship at the largest Vrin cruiser in range. The Vrin vessel tried to evade, but human destroyers were built sturdy, and the paternal instinct crashed into its target at a significant fraction of light speed. Both ships exploded in a bloom of nuclear fire. The blast took out 2 more Vrin vessels that had been in close formation. Captain Martinez died instantly, but he took 400 Vrin with him, and he proved a point. Humans would trade their lives without hesitation if it meant making the enemy patha. Vrin fleet began to understand they were fighting an enemy that operated on different principles. Admiral Catherine watched the paternal instincts sacrifice and felt her heart break, but she did not slow the assault. All ships press forward. She commanded, make every shot count. Make them remember James Chen. The battle became a brutal, close-quarters engagement. Human ships closed to knife-fighting range, where Vrin technological superiority mattered less. Crews that had trained for decades in peace now executed combat maneuvers with savage efficiency. The destroyer Father's Shield lost its main guns but rammed a Vrin frigate. The cruiser Maya's Tears had its engines crippled but used maneuvering thrusters to position itself between Vrin attackers and damaged human vessels across The battlefield humans demonstrated something the Vryn had never encountered. They demonstrated well every time a human ship died, its crew made sure to take Vryn vessels with them every time. The Vryn thought they had gained an advantage. Human reinforcements appeared. The battle lasted for hours. It ended. The Vryn defensive fleet had been destroyed, but the cost was terrible. Humanity had lost 23 ships and over 4,000. Crew members in Marl Catherine stood amid damage reports and casualty lists. Her ship had taken hits that would require months of repair, but they had won the first engagement and, more importantly, they had sent a message the Vryn were not invincible. Broadcast our demands again. Catherine ordered and began landing operations. We're taking the system. Across the Vryn homeworld, panic spread as human landing craft descended through the atmosphere. Vryn military scrambled ground forces, but they were designed for police actions, not full-scale war. Human Marines hit the ground with weapons they had hoped never to use. They advanced with precision, born of training and fury, born of purpose. Every soldier carried a picture of James Chun. Every squad leader read the name Maya Chen before combat operations. They were not fighting for territory. They were fighting because a father died protecting his daughter, and the galaxy needed to understand what that meant. The Vryn attempted to mount a defense, but discovered that humans fought with a combination of discipline and rage that was impossible to counter. When Vryn forces retreated, humans pursued. Vryn forces fortified positions humans simply went around or through superior technology meant nothing against an enemy that would accept any cost to achieve their objectives. Within 2 days, human forces had secured the Vryn capital. Observer Thek was captured attempting to flee in a civilian transport. They brought the Vryn official before Admiral Catherine. In what had been the collective high command center, Thek stood in restraints surrounded by human Marines. Catherine approached slowly. "Do you understand now?" she asked quietly. "Do you understand what you killed?" Thek's multifaceted eyes regarded her without comprehension. "I followed collective protocols. It stated I acted according to regulations. Your response is disproportionate and illogical." Catherine felt something cold settle in her chest. This creature would never understand. None of them would. "You're right," she said. "Our response is disproportionate. We lost 4,000 people taking this system. We will lose more before this is over. By any rational calculation, we should have accepted your compensation, but we are not rational when it comes to our children. We are not efficient when it comes to our families. We are human. And you are going to learn what that means." She turned to her Marines. "Take it to holding. We'll deal with it later." As Thek was led away, Catherine returned to her tactical display. The Vryn Collective controlled 47 star systems. Humanity had taken 146 to go. She opened a channel to Earth Command. Initial objectives secured. She reported requesting additional fleets. "We're going to need everything we've got." The response came from Earth's Unified Council. "Additional forces are already en route. You are authorized to proceed with full campaign. Show them what judgment looks like, Admiral. Make them remember James Chen." Catherine looked at her crew, who stood ready despite their exhaustion. She thought about Captain Martinez and the 4,000 others who had already died. She thought about Maya Chen growing up without her father, and she gave the order that would reshape the galaxy. "Prepare for system jump. Next target is the Vryn military production world. We're going to take their ability to fight, and then we're going to take everything else." The video reached Earth within 6 hours. James Chen dying to save his daughter played on every news feed and social platform across human civilization. People watched in their homes, on colony stations, and aboard ships traveling between stars. They watched a father make the choice that every parent hopes they would make but prays they never have. And then they watched the Vryn call him livestock. The response was immediate and visceral. On Mars, a grandmother who had lost her son in the Titan mining disaster 20 years ago watched the footage and wept on. Europa Station, a father held his newborn daughter and felt rage build in his chest like a physical force. On Earth itself, in the chambers of the Unified Council, representatives from every human nation and colony gathered in emergency session. The debate lasted less than an hour. Ambassador Chen Lee spoke for the Asian coalition with tears streaming down her face because James Chen had been her nephew. "They think we will forget," she said to the assembled council. "They think we will accept payment and move on." They do not understand what they have done, the American representative stood, and his voice carried the weight of a nation built on the principle that all people deserve dignity. Our species has fought wars over the recovery of our dead. He said, we have crossed oceans and continents to bring home single soldiers. We carved no man left behind into our military doctrine. And now, an alien species thinks 10,000 credits settles the murder of a father who died protecting his child. The European representative added, her voice, we have tried peace. She stated flatly, we have extended friendship and trade. But there are lines that cannot be crossed. There are insults that cannot be tolerated. James Chen deserves justice. One by one, every representative stood and spoke. The African Union demanded accountability. The South American Coalition called for immediate action. The Pacific Alliance voted for military response. The motion passed unanimously. For the first time in 3 generations, humanity spoke with one voice. And that voice said no. Meanwhile, across human space, the response was already building on the colony world of New Hera. A retired admiral named Catherine Okonkwo watched the video of James Chun's death. She had spent the last 5 years tending her garden and teaching history to local children. Now, she put down her gardening tools and made a call to her old executive officer, Michael. She said when he answered, have you seen it? I've seen it. Commander Michael Torres replied. His voice sounded like gravel. The fleet. Catherine said, can we mobilize? There was a pause, and then Michael answered with words she had hoped never to hear again. We still have ships in reserve. He confirmed, we still have crews who remember how to fight. Give the word. Admiral Catherine looked at her garden where flowers grew in peaceful abundance. She thought about the children she taught who had never known warthin. She thought about James Chen throwing himself in front of a plasma blast to save his little girl. Begin recall procedures. She ordered, I want every ship that can fly ready within the month, Admiral. Michael replied, it's good to have you back. I wish I wasn't. Catherine said honestly, but she made the next call anyway, and the next, and the next. Within days, the recall had spread across human military networks. Retired officers returned to service. Reserve crews reported to their station ships that had been mothballed in orbital yards began receiving maintenance and upgrades. The Vrin Collective noticed the activity but remained unconcerned. They had seen species posture before military exercises were common, and human saber-rattling would pass once emotions cooled. Observer Thek filed reports about increased human military movements, but recommended no action. The humans are experiencing collective emotional distress. Its report concluded this is typical for species with strong parental bonding instincts. No credible threat exists. Recommend standard monitoring protocols. The Vrin High Command agreed. They had superior technology in a vast empire spanning 47 star systems. Humanity has controlled only 12 systems, and their ships were slower and less efficient. Vrin had defeated 3 other species in the last century. They felt no concern about angry primates, but they had never fought humans. Before, they had never encountered a species that remembered every slight and every loss. They had never faced an enemy that didn't fight for territory or resources, but for principle. Laboratories across human space, scientists who had dedicated their lives to peaceful research received classified communications. Dr. Sarah Kimura had spent 15 years developing fusion technology for clean energy. Now, military intelligence wanted her to weaponize her research. She stared at the request for 3 days before watching the James Chen video one more time. Then she called the military liaison and said, yes, Dr. James. Okafor had pioneered breakthrough advances in cybernetic interfaces for medical purposes. The military wanted him to create battlefield control systems. He watched his own daughter sleeping and thought about Maya Chen, who would grow up without a father. He accepted the contract across human civilization. The greatest minds turned their talents toward, or they did it reluctantly. They did it with full knowledge of what they were creating, but they did it because the Vrin had made a terrible miscalculation. They had shown humanity that they valued efficiency over life, and humanity could not let that stand. On Kepler 442b, Sarah Chen received messages from across human space. Strangers sent condolences and offers of support. Veterans promised that her husband would be avenged. Politicians vowed that the Vrin would answer for their crimes. She read them all while Maya slept fitfully in the next room, the colony administrator visited personally to inform her that the Unified Council had issued a formal demand to the Vrin Collective. They, one of the officials responsible for James's death, handed over for trial. They wanted a formal apology. They wanted acknowledgement that a father's life mattered more than equipment malfunction, reports the Vrin. Response arrived 3 days later, was brief and dismissive. The incident has been resolved according to collective protocols. It read, compensation has been allocated. This matter is concluded. The Vrin Collective does not recognize external judicial authority. We do not apologize for equipment failures. We suggest humanity focus on emotional regulation rather than unproductive hostility. When that message was made public, something broke in the human psyche. The rage that had been building found focus. The sorrow transformed into determination. Earth's Unified Council convened again, and this time the session lasted only 15 minutes. They did not vote on whether to respond. They voted on how much force was authorized. The answer was simple and terrible. All. Ofed Morello Conquo received her orders while standing on the bridge of the UHS Righteous Fury. The ship had been pulled from reserve and now hummed with lethal purpose around her. The crew worked with quiet efficiency. Were professionals, and they knew what was coming. All ships report ready. Her executive officer, announced Catherine, looked at the tactical display showing the human fleet assembling in high orbit. Above Earth, 67 capital ships, 213 support vessels, 15,000 crew members, and behind them, the entire industrial capacity of human civilization ready to build more. She thought about James Chen one more time. She thought about every parent who had ever sacrificed for their child. Then she gave the order that would change galactic history. Set course for Vrin space. She commanded maximum speed and prepare a message for transmission on all frequencies. Her communications officer looked up attentively. The message is simple. Catherine said humanity is coming, and we are not negotiating. James Chen walked through the marketplace on Kepler 44 to be with his daughter. Maya's small hand tucked safely in his own. The morning sun cast orange light across New Terraform City, where humans and aliens mixed in daily commerce and trade. Maya pointed at colorful fabrics hanging from vendor stalls, while James smiled down at her excitement. The 7-year-old had begged to come to the market today because the Vrin merchants sometimes brought crystalline toys that changed colors in sunlight. James had agreed despite his wife Sarah's concern about the increasing Vrin military presence in their colony. The Vrin Collective had established trade relations with humanity 3 years ago, and both species benefited from the exchange of technology and resources, but something felt different lately. The tall insectoid Vrin moved through crowds with cold efficiency, and their security drones hovered everywhere like metallic vultures. James noticed one drone behaving strangely near the children's section of the market where Maya wanted to goots. Red scanning light flickered erratically, and the machine drifted lower than safety regulations permitted. He tightened his grip on Maya's hand and tried to steer her toward a different path. The drone suddenly rotated, and its weapons array deployed with a mechanical whine that made everyone nearby freeze. James saw the targeting laser paint across a group of children, including Maya, who stood perfectly within the firing arc. Time became liquid and slow. Every parent knows this moment exists somewhere in possibility, but never believes it will arrive in their own life. The drone's plasma cannon began to glow with lethal energy. James didn't think or calculate or weigh his options. He simply moved his body, crashed into Maya, and knocked her sideways behind a vendor stall as the plasma burst erupted from the drone. Superheated energy struck James in the chest and carved through him like he was made of paper. He hit the ground already dead, but his last living act had pushed his daughter out of the kill zone. Maya's screams tore through the marketplace as she crawled toward her father's smoking body. Human vendors and shoppers rushed forward, but Vrin security personnel were already surrounding the scene. A Vrin official designated observer, Vic, approached with its chitinous body moving in precise, calculated steps. It examined James's corpse with multifaceted eyes, while Maya sobbed and tried to shake her father awake. The human is terminated, Vic announced in perfectly translated English that somehow carried no emotion despite the words being correct. Compensation will be allocated according to collective protocols. Sarah Chen arrived running and screaming after someone messaged Her about the incident, she fell to her knees beside her husband's body and pulled Maya into her arms while both of them shook with grief. What happened? Sarah demanded through tears that streamed down her face. Who did this? Observer Thek tilted its triangular head and consulted a datapad. Security Drone Unit 742 experienced a minor software malfunction. It explained. The human male placed himself in the defensive fire pattern. Child survival probability was calculated at 67%. The adult male sacrifice was statistically inefficient. Standard compensation for human livestock loss is 10,000 credits. This amount will be transferred to the family unit within 3 business cycles. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Livestock. Statistically inefficient. Minor malfunction. She looked up at the Vrin official with something dangerous growing behind her grief. My husband died saving our daughter, she said in a voice that shook with barely contained rage. You killed him. Observer Thek made a gesture that might have been the Vrin equivalent of a shrug. Incorrect assessment. It replied. The drone terminated the human Vrin personnel bear no responsibility for equipment malfunction. Your compensation package is generous by collective standards. Please remove the biological matter from the commercial zone within the hour. Biological matter. Sarah wanted to scream or attack or somehow make this creature understand what it had just taken from her family, but dozens of witnesses were already recording everything on their personal devices. She saw humans in the crowd with faces twisted in shock and fury. She saw other species watching with various expressions of concern or indifference. She saw the cold mechanical certainty in observer Thek's alien eyes that told her this being would never understand what it meant to love someone enough to die for them. Security personnel ushered the crowd away while medical teams removed James's body. Maya clung to her mother and whispered, Daddy, wake up, over and over until the words lost meaning. Sarah held her daughter and stared at the Vrin officials who were already filing reports and closing the incident with bureaucratic efficiency. Didn't know that 3 different witnesses had already sent the full footage to news networks. She didn't know that the video was spreading through human space like wildfire. She didn't know that in the halls of Earth's Unified Council, emergency sessions were being called. She didn't know that humanity's greatest military minds were watching her husband die on repeat and feeling something ancient and terrible wake up in their species memory. She only knew that James had died protecting their child, and these aliens thought 10,000 credits was adequate compensation for a father's love, though. Marketplace slowly returned to normal activity. Vendors reopened their stalls, and shoppers resumed browsing, and the Vrin went about their business as if nothing significant had occurred. But in the human sections of New Terraform City, something else was happening. Families held their children closer. Veterans of the old Earth wars checked weapons they had hoped never to use against colony administrators. They began quietly backing up all essential data and preparing evacuation protocols, because humans recognized something the Vrin did not. This wasn't just a tragedy. This wasn't just an accident. This was the spark hand humanity had always known. Fire. Sarah carried Maya home through streets that felt different than they had that morning. Her daughter had stopped crying but remained silent in a way that frightened Sarah more than the tears inside their small apartment. Sarah sat on the couch and held Maya while news alerts began flooding her communication device. The footage was everywhere. James throwing himself in front of the plasma burst. Observer that calling him livestock. The casual dismissal of a father's sacrifice. Sarah watched the video only once before she had to turn it off. But she knew millions of humans across dozens of worlds were watching it over and over. She knew they were seeing what she saw, a good man dying to protect his child, and aliens who could not comprehend why that mattered. The sun set on Kepler 4 for Tubi, and Sarah Chen put her daughter to bed with whispered promises that everything would be okay. She didn't know if that was true. She didn't know what would happen next, but somewhere deep in her bones, she felt it. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake, and humanity was about to remind everyone why you never dismiss a parent's love.